Welcome to Everything Co-op, bringing you information on how cooperatives can help improve your quality of life. This show is being sponsored by the National Co-op Bank, NCB. The NCB is dedicated to strengthening communities nationwide for the delivery of banking and financial services for the nation's cooperatives, their members, and other socially responsible organizations. For more information on the power of community ownership, visit ncb.coop. That's ncb.coop. Now stay tuned for your host, Vernon Oakes.
Good morning, everybody. This is Vernon Oakes. On this great Thursday morning, we're going to have some rain here in the District of Columbia and around. So we're going to have rain that will nourish the soil so we can grow things. And today we have Brian Albert as our guest, who's with Equal Exchange, and they buy from farmers who grow things all over the world, and they give them a fair price for their products. Good morning, Brian.
Good morning, Vernon. Thank you for having me today.
Oh, thank you so much for taking out your time to be with us on the program this morning. You have a degree in accounting and food industry and used to work with Merrill Lynch. How does that apply to Equal Exchange co-ops?
I think on one level there's a lot that does apply, but I think what really attracted me to Equal Exchange were some of the things that did not apply. And what I mean by that is, accounting numbers is numbers. Any business needs to have good, accurate systems to track their business, their revenues, their expenses. But most of the other businesses I had worked in along the way were more of the mainstream business model where, the profits went to the few and the work was done by the many.
Okay. All right.
So I think that was what attracted me to Equal Exchange was a completely different model. I had been around the block a little bit. I had done a few different things. I had even done a brief stint trying self-employment and realized there was some benefit to having a full-time, steady job with benefits. And coming back into the workforce, I saw an advertisement in print media, and I might be one of the last people on the planet to have found a job that way. Equal Exchange was looking for what they were calling a controller at that point, and I figured my skill set was there. But as one does when you're looking for a new job, you start to do a little bit of the due diligence yourself and learn a little bit about the company. And I was just fascinated by the co-op model and the mission of Equal Exchange. I wanted to do something that was going to be a little bigger than just
counting the numbers.
Work a day, and grind away. It's something that, it's a little bigger than me and bigger than just a typical day job.
Brian, I want to go all the way back to the something you said first off, and that is you used to work for businesses where the profit went to the few people and the work was at the many. And that's what most capitalistic model businesses are. There's a hierarchy, and the people that have capital put money into the business, and then they get a return off of it. And I got an MBA, and most of the decisions were made with return on investment. What gives you the best return on investment for the investors? Not necessarily what's best for the employees, or not necessarily what's best for your clients or your vendors, but what's best for the investors. And that drove the decision model. So that is what most businesses in the world, particularly in the U.S., that's what they're designed for. And Equal Exchange has a total different mission. And what's that? What attracted you to Equal Exchange?
Well, when I looked in and I started to learn a little bit about fair trade and paying farmers a living wage rather than just trying to squeeze them for every nickel that you could. Actually paying the people who do the hard work at the beginning of the supply chain a fair and living wage, and it just seemed like something completely different. And the financials for Equal Exchange were such that I looked at profitability was fairly low. So I soon came to the realization that, while Equal Exchange is a for-profit company, it's certainly not one that is profit motivated.
Right. So you get lower profits, but you want to make sure that your vendor, the farmer, gets paid a fair wage for their product. Now, I've had 3 other people from Equal Exchange on the show last December, and I got a lot of information about this fair trade, and it sort of what I got was there are commodity indexes, and you pay based on those indexes, not on how you can negotiate somebody down and keep negotiating them down. So you end up paying a fair price for the products, and that starts it. And then you get into this co-op model. Did you know about co-ops before you heard about EcoExchange?
I knew conceptually what a co-op was, and I thought it was kind of a radical hippie idea.
Okay. Well, Brian, you knew more about it than I did. I knew nothing about co-ops until I started. I'm a property manager in the daytime, and it wasn't until I started managing housing co-ops that I started learning about it. And the more I learned about them, the more I liked them, particularly, again, comparing it to the capitalistic model. I liked it for a whole lot of reasons. Okay, so we got a hippie radical model here. So what made it a hippie radical model?
Well, it's just the whole concept of having spent all of my adult working life in that mainstream workaday model. It was just a completely different idea that people could actually have a voice in the operation of the company, and that the founder and the newest worker owner here each have the opportunity to buy one share in the company, a voting share, and then they exercise that one vote, one worker, one vote. It was just like, wow, this is really different. It's so unlike anything I had done. One of my few questions when I interviewed for the position was, why do we even have to advertise to hire folks? Why aren't people just lined up at the door to be part of this?
Well, I think the more people understand it, and this is why the National Co-op Bank is sponsoring this radio program, the more people understand this model, the more people want to have it, because you have a say in how things are done in the business. But now I'm changing my property management business to a worker cooperative. We're going through that. We've been 8 months into it. And it is difficult to get people to change the attitude from employee to owner. There is a major shift. And everybody does not want to make that shift. Some people just want to come to work, do their 40 hours, get their paycheck, go home, and sit up in front of the TV or whatever they do. They don't want to think about it or work it, because there is work. So some people don't want it. I get that. But I would believe that most people, once they understand this model, would go for it. And like you said, why isn't there a line around the block for this to be involved in it?
Exactly. And I think in the last 10 years, I've been here it'll be 10 years Sunday that I will have been at Equal Exchange. And in that time, there are more and more people. But, I grew up in a suburb of Boston. I live in a suburb of Boston. I grew up in Boston proper. But living in a suburb of Boston, when I first started working here, and I would tell people about where I was working and the business model and the whole co-op concept, they would just be slack-jawed and wide-eyed looking at me and saying, like, does that really work? And so, yeah, it works. It works quite well.
Well, as I've told people about changing this to where the workers have a say in as a group, people think it's crazy and it won't work. I've had people have that view, is that you can't get a group of people to get in and make group decisions, for example. But I said, yeah, it can work, particularly once that the group of people decide on the process of how decisions were made and put in place policies and procedures of how things are made. It can work extremely well. Matter of fact, I had believed this because I'd heard of ESOPs, employee stock option plans, and I thought that they would work very well because it takes longer to get a decision when you have a group. It takes longer because you have to get people all up aboard and get them knowledge so they can make an informed decision. But once people make the decision, then the implementation is much faster. That's and better. Have you found that to happen in your 10 years?
Yes. So direct to the question, yes, that absolutely does work. And I think just by human nature being what it is, if you're part of the decision making, then you don't have to have that, where in the typical model where the top-down decision making is more prevalent. The higher ups, so to speak, make the decision, and then they have to try to force it on the people who actually do the work. In this model, people who do the work are part of the decision-making process, so you have that instant buy-in.
Yeah. So you get the instant buy-in, and because they've helped make the decision, and they are doing the work, they'll know how to implement. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. That's why you get a better implementation, because they're doing the work. They made a decision. They know how to do it, and they're right doing it. So it happens much quicker. Now let's go back to counting the numbers. Accounting. I have a master's in math, and I thought I wanted to be an accountant because of that skill set. So we have something in common here in the numbers. So every business, whether it's a co-op or for-profit or nonprofit or capitalistic model or not, they have to have somebody to do the accounting, just to how much you pay for things and how much you sell things for. How has that been for you at Equal Exchange?
There are debits and credits and debits and credits, and those things happen all day long. There are a few unique things about Equal Exchange and pre-harvest finance, and again with going back to the fair trade model. So there are some things to learn about that. So that to me was really interesting. I'm the type of person that I don't want to just sit in there and be part of a machine and put the green lampshade on and wear my visor and just do accounting work. Mm-hmm. So learning new things about it was really great. And then the whole finance capital model.
Before you go to the financial capital model, what is it about the fair trade model? What is it about those numbers you had to learn? What?
Well, one of the tenets of fair trade is that the farmers will have access to pre-harvest finance, right? So, like any farmer, he or she only makes money basically once a year when they're selling their crop, but they have expenses year round. So, how do they live in the time in between harvests, and how do they have access to money? In the traditional model, they had essentially loan sharking arrangements, not to be too dramatic about it, but there were a limited number of points of access where a small farmer could access and get a loan. Mm-hmm. And the people who generally provided the loans were the same people that they would then have to sell their product to. And the coffee's grown in pretty remote areas, so you had limited access to market when it came time to sell your product. It was, again, typically to the person who made the loan to you, and that person would often set the prices that weren't very great for the farmers.
We have to take a break, but what that reminds me of, and I think people can identify to this, at least I grew up in West Virginia, and my grandfather worked in the mines, and my father worked on the railroad, and we would buy our goods from the company store, and there was a owe my soul to the company store kind of model, where you go there and you buy your food or your clothes, and you buy you pay more for them, and then they would take it out of your paycheck. And more often than not, you may not even get a paycheck because you owe them everything. I owe my soul to the company store, and it would be the same thing from the farmers. You're saying that. But we're going to take a break, and we'll be right back. I want to get more into this harvest finance and then go to some other things that you're talking about with financing and accounting at Equal Exchange. We'll be right back.
News updates on the web at WOLDCnews.com.
Information is power. That's WOL's motto, and that's NCB is sponsoring this program. So give you the information where you'd have the power to start a worker cooperative. Most co-ops are formed to solve some community problem. So if you have a problem in your community, if 2, 3, 4 of you get together to start a business, you could go to the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives, and they have people that will help you to give you the technology to know how to start a business. And there's some people around the Cooperative Development Foundation. They have funds available to help seed money to start a business. So there's people around to help start businesses. In New York, they put $1 million a year for 5 years to help worker co-ops get started. So there's in Madison, Wisconsin, I think they put up $1.2 million last year, and they're going for $2.4 million this year to start worker co-ops. So we would like to try to do the same kinds of things here in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area to see if we can get seed monies to help start worker cooperatives. And one worker cooperative that I really like is Equal Exchange. And we have Brian Albert on the phone with us today. He is talking about, he is their finance Director of Finance. So we're talking about the normal accounting functions, finance functions, and he was talking about harvest financing before we went back. And I was relating that to owing my soul to the company store, which was what would happen in the mines of West Virginia on the railroad where my father worked. And so these same farmers would owe their souls to the people that loaned them the money and bought their products. And normally it was at prices or interest rates that were beneficial to the person that was loaning the money, detrimental to the farmer. Have I got it right, Brian?
Yeah, just one nuance is it's pre-harvest finance that is part of the fair trade model.
Okay. So how does that work to get them out of this loan sharks?
There are a couple of entities that we work with. There's one here in the U.S., based in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and another in the UK that will advance money to the farmers just based on the fact that they have a contract with Equal Exchange. And that will allow them to access up to 60% of the value of the contract. So they'll have money in cash flow during the time of year before the harvest. And then when the harvest comes in, they sell the product to us, they make their delivery, and then we make arrangements for them to receive the final payment, the additional 40%, less a nominal interest amount, and then we pay the people who provided the finance. And in some cases, we actually do some pre-harvest financing ourselves directly to some of the farmer co-ops that we work with.
Do you feel like you can talk about the differences in the interest rates when they were with the loan sharks versus the pre-harvest financing that you all helped them get?
I know that they are significant. I think, quite frankly, on the director of purchasing and the purchasing people that we have probably could speak better to it. But
okay.
I know that we're talking, you go from 4 or 5, maybe 6%, depending on the entity, relative to a double-digit interest rate, and in high teens, I think, was not unusual. But I can't. Okay. Nothing I could be swear to in court, but okay. Outrageous amount of interest.
So even if it were 16% before, it could be 6% now, which is a 10% spread, which is more than significant. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted some sense of it. I won't hold you to being exact in court or here. Okay. But get some sense that if you had to pay 16%, and you can get financing for a car versus 6% or 2% or 4%, it's a tremendous difference in how much you have to pay out. So that people, again, the farmer in this case, can have funds to help provide, you said subsistence, but live every day. As a matter of fact, I don't remember who was on the program, and one farmer described it this way, that they had monies, they could feed their family year round, was their definition of success by working with these kinds of programs, where before they didn't have enough money to feed their family. They could feed their family year round, and they had some savings left over at the end of the year. So it's a tremendous change from 16% to 6 or 19% to 4. As one of the examples, plus some of the other things that can happen with Equal by being in a co-op. Okay, but now we want to go back to what are some of the other things that you learned as you started looking at and working for Equal Exchange that's different from your other jobs?
I think one of them would be the capital model would be the main difference. And it was really interesting to me to see that, having worked with Merrill Lynch and having worked in the finance arena quite a few years ago, to realize that in addition to businesses like Equal Exchange, which there are a few of us out there, there are a fairly large number of individuals and some institutions that are willing to put their money into supporting a business like ours that's more mission-based than profit-based, mm-hmm. and they're willing to take a lower return than they might get on the stock market to help us to do the work that we do. And that was really an eye-opener for me that, wow, yeah, there are actually individuals that work like this business works.
So you can have an investor. Now, is there a name for those investors that will invest because of mission as opposed to profit?
Yeah, well, there's SRI is the term that's used in the industry. It's socially responsible investing. So there are quite a few people, and there are some organizations and entities that actually gather like-minded individuals in these types of arenas. So it's more the social return. It's knowing that money that I have it's not going to make me rich, but it's going to help somebody else improve their life, get to the point like you just alluded to, the people who are eking out a living and just barely on the sustenance level. The farmers aren't getting rich on this, not by a long shot, but they are able to feed their families, and that's a great place to start.
SRI, social responsible investing. And I noticed you said it may not get rich. I did a couple programs here by looking at money and rich, or what does it really take to live? I mean, what do you really need? And more often, if a person has what they already need and they're looking for a return off of their investment, but they don't really need a whole lot, or they're looking for enough return off of their investment to meet their needs, so that they can say, okay, I can invest in something that's social responsible investment like Equal Exchange, and I might get a 3-4% return, where in the market I might get 5-6-7% return, and that 2-3-4% return more than meets my needs, or it meets my needs, and so that's fine. So you get people with a different attitude. I'm not trying to just gather more toys so that when I die I can say I had more toys. But I'm really just trying to get enough so I can meet my needs and do something that benefits somebody else. Social, responsible investment. So I'm seeing more and more of that as people. What always surprises me is when people that have more than they need, they have $1 billion. If they invested at 4%, they have $400 million coming in without hitting a lick. And then they still want more and more and more and more. And I'm going, why? Why? $1 billion. I think that's the 9 zeros, if I count that right. Okay.
I'd agree.
Okay. So you get more and more people. If you get more and more people that are social responsible, that are looking to work in an organization like Equal Exchange, or what I'm hoping Oaks Property Management becomes, and other companies like this, or if people want to start it, this is why we have this program, to give you the information, to talk about the benefits of coming together, working together cooperatively. And in a lot of communities, Native American communities, Alaska American community, a lot of the tribes out of Africa, the history going down to Peru, they work cooperatively. That's how the tribe worked. Everybody knew what they had to do, and you work collectively for the benefit of everybody, not for the individual. So I'm glad you. Is there anything else then that you found from the financial model of working with Equal Exchange? Any other? You've given us 2 great examples.
Well, just to circle back again, and just I want to maybe shine a light again on the fact that Equal Exchange, we target the profitabilities between 2 and 5%, right? And most companies would say, boy, you just scrape and buy there at 2 to 5% profitability. We have grown in the 10 years I've been here from $20 million to we're knocking on the door of $60 million in 10 years.
The sales.
So
the sales
you don't need to have an 8, 10, 12% profit to grow and to do well.
But let me get it. There was 20 million of sales when you came, and now it's 60 million of sales. You tripled yourself in 10 years.
Yes.
Okay. Wonderful. Wonderful.
Yeah, it can be done.
Well, 2 to 5%, if you can consistently do it too, and do good while you're making money, that's absolutely phenomenal. You're growing 3 times in 10 years. That is great. So you can help the farmer by getting them pre-harvest financing at a better rate, so they'll be able to survive and maybe even strive. And then you can find people that will do social responsible investments. So they're looking for a potential lower return, but helping people. And then you can have a 2 to 5% profit margin goal, and and then for make decisions not necessarily what's give you the most profit, but what's best for everybody concerned. Like the model, we're going to take a break on that, and we'll be right back. We'll talk more about equal exchange, get into some more about fair trade and how it works, and I also want to get into how you divide up that 2 to 5% profit between the workers and growing the business. We'll be right back. Don't touch the dial.
News updates on the web at WOLDCnews.com.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Vernon Oaks, Everything Cooperative. We're talking to Brian Albert from Equal Exchange, who got a job which they call a comptroller. He's their director of finance. We've just talked about pre-harvest financing for the farmers and social responsible investment for them to get investing into Equal Exchange. And they have a goal of 2 to 5% profit. And with that that goal for their company is basically small, but if you look at 2%, 10 years ago when he started, they had $20 million of sales. So during the break, I tried to do a little math. If they made 3% on $20 million, that would be $600,000 in profit if I did my math right. And if they did 10% of 3% of $60 million is $1.8 million. So they would, do I have my zeros right?
Yes, you do. Decimal places are right where they should be.
Okay. So you would, if you had a consistent 3%, that's somewhere between the 2 and the 5% profit margin. 3% of $20 million, you would have made $600,000 10 years ago in profit. And if you made 3% on $60 million, you grew it to $60 million in 10 years. That's triple the growth rate. And that's also triple the amount of profit if it was still at 3%, which would be $1.8 million. So how do you divide that up, and who decides? Because I think that third principle of cooperative is the economic participation, that to be a member of a co-op, normally there's some money that you put in, and you also have the opportunity of getting money back out. So who decides what you do with that $1.8 million, if that's what you made?
Well, now you said that you have a background in finance and accounting, so you know that if you talk too much about it, you're going to lose the audience, and I'll try not to do that to you.
I'll try to break it down if if it gets too okay. The first question is, who decides what that money goes to, though?
Yeah, bylaws have parts of a formula in there that dictate that 60% of the money right off the bat goes back into the business to help grow the business.
Well, who made that decision? Who made that decision?
The worker owners. The worker owners make that decision.
That was the first point I wanted to get across. The worker owners. When you're a worker in a co-op, you are owner, and Brian has already talked about that's one share, one vote. So when they're creating policies on who decides what happens to that $1.8 million, those shareholders decide that. And each one of them will come and vote. And so they have decided that 60% of the profit, $1.8 million, stays in the business, right?
Yes.
Okay. What else?
Okay, so 60% goes to the business. That leaves 40% available to be distributed to the worker owners. And of that 40%, we base the distribution on the FTE, the full-time equivalency status of the people who actually did the work at Equal Exchange. So
that means that the more you worked, the more you get back. That's the FTE. If you work full-time, then you'll get something back. If you work part-time, you get less back based on how much you worked. Is that what that means? Okay.
Right, yeah. If you work 4 days a week, you'd be considered at 80%. You'd get an 80% share. But then it's also there's because of the growth we've had, one of the side benefits of this growth is that we've had to, or have been able to hire more workers. And during the first year, you're not considered a full-time worker owner. You're on track to become one. So there's a learning process about, in my case, what does it mean to be part of a co-op? We have educational components to that. But I don't want to go down too far down that path.
Well, I think the only thing that I really wanted people to understand is when you are hired at Equal Exchange, this is Equal Exchange rules that the worker owners have created. You cannot become an owner, and you can only become an owner after 1 year. And you're a worker, you're an employee, you get paid, but you don't share in the dividends, you don't have a vote, you don't have a say, at least for 1 year. And you have to prove yourself by taking classes and by doing certain things, and you have a sponsor. I really like the program, okay? Brian, that's what I want you to hear. So there are some things you have to do to prove yourself that you will be a responsible owner. There is responsibility that goes with this. So I just want that point to be made, and so there is a vote that the members will vote to see if this worker if they really want this worker to become an owner, and that's based on behavior, what they've done and what they've learned. All right, keep going.
Okay, so let's just say that in the course of a year, 75% of the work was done by worker owners, the other 25% by the folks that are on the worker owner track. And given the seasonality of our business, there are some temporary workers as well. So we would take the 40% and reduce it to 75% of that 40%. And then that is what is distributed to the folks that actually were worker owners during the course of the year.
Okay, so it makes sense to me because I've already had this conversation before, and I like it. It was a method to make sure that the current worker owners would not say, okay, I'm not going to let any more worker owners come in because I get a share of 40, I get the whole 40%. So what they decided to do was say, okay, you can only take out worker owners that amount that you really contribute. If there were some non-worker owners working, they can't get that amount, but we want to make sure that you are okay with and don't get greedy so that you will only be able to get the amount of profits that you worked for. So if the worker owners did 75% of the work, they can get 75% of that 40%, which turns out to be 30%. The math worked really well, but okay, I got it. And I like the reasons why the workers decided to do this for future, making sure that the pathway was available for new worker owners to come in and participate.
So then there's two more links on this chain, and one is pretty obviously what happens to the other 10%? Well, that gets added to the original 60% that gets rolled into grow the business. So that stays in the business to help grow it. And then the final link is then we have, again, by agreement with the worker owners and the bylaws, and each year it's subject to approval by the board, only 50% of what each person has earned through his or her labor in the course of the year is actually paid out to the person, and half of them is invested in an internal capital account, which they will get upon separation from the company.
Okay, so they end up, and I did this, if it was $1.8 million this past year, 30% of that, again, I did the math in my head, $540,000, so hope is right. So of that $540,000, the worker owners get half of that. I think it's $270,000. The other $270,000 goes into a capital account, which is basically a savings account for the workers. Yes,
essentially. We invest the money in our Class B shares. So if you could go back again to the socially responsible investors that are supporting this company, the worker owner body is the largest single entity of those socially responsible investors. We have somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.5 million collectively invested in the business.
Okay, so the worker owners will get a decent check for Christmas bonus or whenever you give it out. Okay. And how many worker owners do you have now that would share that $270,000?
Last year was 115, going off the top of my head.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, 115 worker owners. Okay, so if I did my math, I can't do that in my head, but if it was 100 owners, it would be 27,000 each.
Right. Yeah, it was about $2,350 actually paid out, and then another $2,350.
23,500 paid out.
I'm sorry, 235,000. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Somewhere in that general neighborhood, and then the other half of that is invested in the employee's name in our Class B shares.
But if it was 235,000, that's almost like 20,000 of an employee. That's a decent Christmas bonus. That's a very decent.
It comes out to, let me do the math here, $540,000 divided by 115. Yeah, it's a little over $4,500 each.
A little over.
Half of which gets paid out to you, and half is invested.
40,000 each.
4,000.
Oh, I did my math wrong. 4,000 each. Okay, I got my decimal in the wrong place then. So if it's 4,000 each, then 2,000 they get for Christmas bonus or whenever you pass. When do you give this out?
We try to do it soon after the year end. Our fiscal year is the calendar year.
Okay.
By the time we get all the work done to do a year end close, it's usually we make an estimate and pay out a significant amount of that in sometime in February, usually at the February worker owner meeting.
Okay, so good way to start a new year. All right.
Yeah. Well, to catch you up from Christmas, to go back to that connection you were making.
Okay. All right. So we just worked out that you got a lot of things here working financially. The worker owner is the one that creates this process that we just went through. They made the decision. There was nobody else in a different city or different town or different country, like a shareholders in the capitalistic model, that makes the decisions. The shareholders in a normal capitalistic model will be the ones that vote on who are the directors, and those directors make the policies of the board of directors. Normally, the workers have no say on who's on the board of directors, but in this worker owner model, the owners are the shareholders, and each shareholder, no matter how long they've been in the business, once you become a shareholder, you have one share and one vote. And then in these policy decisions, like what do you do with the money that is the profit, and what's the profit motive, and then what do you do with the money that's the profit, then those worker owners make those decisions. But it also means that you have to be educated, and that's the fifth principle of the cooperative model is education, training, and information. And that's the first principle, Brian, that I really drew me to this co-op, because I've taught 12 years in my career. In education, my grandfather used to say, sober or drunk now, he used to say, get an education, boy, nobody can take it from you. Matter of fact, Brian, I'm going to put this on air. I've never said it before, but he really said the white man cannot take that education from you. So growing up black in America in West Virginia, it's just like, what can you do with your world and your life? And it was get an education. Nobody can take that from you. So, and I've heard when I've had people from around the world on the program, different people have said the same thing. No matter where the farmer is, no matter where the worker is, they get educated by being in the co-op. And that's what you said, that whenever you come on, when you came on, no matter how much education you had before you came on, you've got to get educated in the cooperative model, and you have to get educated about the policies and procedures of equal exchange. So I like this education. Do you have anything else to say about education, what you got or what you see other people when they get this education, how they change, or what do you see about that?
Well, before I even go into that and answer that question, I want to point out something that resonated with me, what you just said about your father or your grandfather.
Grandfather, yeah.
I think he Yeah, he exemplifies the difference between being educated and being smart. He sounds like a pretty smart guy. Yeah, you can't get an education taken away from you. As far as how that connects to the co-op world.
Can I ask you to just hold that thought? We'll come right back to it because we have to take our next break. And Brian, I think this is our last break. The hour goes by very quickly, but we'll be right back. We'll get the weather and the traffic, and we'll be right back. Thanks.
Okay.
News updates on the web at WOLDCnews.com.
Information is power. NCB's mission, National Cooperative Bank's mission, is to help cooperatives grow by supporting and being an advocate for America's cooperatives and their members, placing special emphasis on serving the needs of communities that are economically challenged. And most of the communities I know where people of color live are economically challenged, and that causes a challenge for a bank. And Brian, Albert, and I are both in the finance world, and knowing that most bankers don't go in communities that are economically challenged because they normally look for people that have collateral. They have a business already started that's successful, or they have land before they'll loan money because they have to make sure they get their money back. So NCB has a challenge, and even in their mission, but they've done it extremely well. I'm quite proud of them and glad that they're sponsoring this program because I can shout out with pride about what they do and how they do it. The same pride I have for Equal Exchange, Brian. And so you were getting ready to talk about education when we took the break.
Right. So one of the principles of the cooperative world is that education for its members. And when I started here 10 years ago, I had been in the business world. I had been in the workforce for 30 years at that point. And still, when I was assigned here, I was handed a binder. We've updated that. It's electronic now. But it's a worker owner handbook, and it includes the bylaws of the organization, a little bit about the history of the company. And in addition to having been given that handbook, a mentor was assigned to me to help me assimilate into this co-op world. And one of the things we do is we are required to attend a certain number of educational classes within Equal Exchange. We have what we call exchange time. And there are some that are core requirements if you think of your college education, the core curriculum that you had to check off having attended that particular exchange time as part of the requirement before you could be voted in to become a full-fledged worker owner.
What were some of, you said assimilate. What do you mean by assimilate into the business?
Well, again, co-op world was completely different to me. I'm used to going in there, you not quite literally, but, you punch the time clock, you do your job, you have your responsibilities, and you take care of that, and then you go home. When you're working in a co-op world, you are not just an employee, you are actually a co-owner of the business, and will make some of the decisions that affect the future of the business. So, just right from the very basic, what's a co-op? What is the history of the business? Let's learn a little bit about coffee, which is it's decreased from over 80% of our revenues when I started here. It's still in the 70s. But let's learn a lot about coffee so we know what the coffee industry is about. This is the industry we're in, so we should know as owners a little bit more about it than the typical workaday worker who comes in here and just punches the clock and goes home.
Did you have to take a test or anything that showed that you learned something?
No, I think your mentor makes sure you're getting up to test. There's no pass fail or anything on that quite that level, but you had to have attended the training. I think our hiring process kind of ensures that there are people here who are going to want to be here and willing to learn.
I think the food co-ops, at least they have a test for the financial part. They want to make sure that people, maybe it's just the board members, but I don't know if it's the board members or all members, they must be able to understand the profit sheet and the balance sheet so that they'll know how to make informed financial decisions. So I've heard that. I'll find out more about that. I like it. So As you've learned, as you have learned about this co-op and the knowledge, has that helped to change you at all? Here's what I'm getting to. So let me try to phrase this question. One of the other Eco Exchange members that was on last year said that he was in a meeting with his boss, and the boss was in charge, but he was also the chairman of the board. So later that day, there may be a board meeting, and then he was in charge, and the boss would have to take direction from him. And so you always had to know who had what role of who was in charge. And that was through knowledge, through training, because that's just not normal. Have you found things like that, and you have to get educated on that? Was that a clear question?
Yeah, no, I get the question. So a couple of things that might answer it, and you can tell me after I'm finished whether I've answered your question.
Okay.
Then we'll know whether I understood it well or not. We refer to wearing different hats.
Okay.
So, like many businesses, we do have a hierarchical structure in terms of the day-to-day operation of the business. So, we have we have co-executive directors, which would essentially be a president and vice president in the traditional model.
Okay.
Then we have management and supervisors and direct reports. Just in the day-to-day running of the business, right? We can't obviously all get in a room and vote about which box we want to package things in, and there's some practical limitations that the day-to-day operations are addressed by a typical structure. It's the bigger things that people need to vote on, that including voting on the board and electing the board members. And 6 of the 9 members of the board are voted from the worker-owner body, and those 6 should be have a little bit more financial acumen than the average worker-owner.
Mm-hmm.
That said, we have had, and you've outed me here, by the way, I'm overdue for another presentation to especially the newer folks as to what is the difference between the income statement, balance sheet, where do the numbers come from for each of those. So I'll have to put that on the to-do list to review that.
So you do that. You're right now the person that trains on that. You're the teacher.
What we do is make it one of the exchange times, so that there is, just a high level, right? We're not going to go into every single nuance of, what's the cost of goods. We conceptually know what a cost of goods represents, not spend 3 days just going into costing.
Okay.
On the financial level. But on a high level, just so the folks, everybody here, again, being a business owner, you really should know a little bit about, if you're looking at the financial statement and you're looking at a balance sheet, you need to know that they do represent different things that together give you a better picture of the financial position of the organization. But we do a high-level hour-and-a-half class. We have had more in-depth in the past with financial training for all, so that everybody went a little bit deeper and spent a couple of days learning a little bit more about that. Mm-hmm. That's just one of the many. That was my presentation. Would be an exchange time. The deeper financial training for all went a little bit deeper than that. And we had somebody come in from the outside, and I even added a couple more nuggets to my knowledge base.
You're constantly learning. I got it. Constantly. Always improve. I didn't know you had 3 non-member board members, so I might want to. I don't know if I have time, but might one day want to decide to run for one of your board positions. Okay. I want to go now to the principles. We only have about 6 more minutes here. The cooperative principles. The first one is volunteer and open membership. Again, being African American, I like this a lot because to be in a co-op, if it's run with these cooperative principles, willing to accept, it's open to all people, regardless of gender, race, political or religious affiliation. When you all look for members, is it open to everybody and anybody?
Absolutely. Our hiring process is pretty successful in that we typically have more than 90% retention on our workforce, and I think you probably would agree that that's a pretty high number.
Yep.
When we interview, we look at 60% of what we look at is probably more related to the individual and their values, fit, team communication, those kinds of soft skills, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And only 40% is related to the job, job-related skills. So basically, we're looking for people who are willing to be here, to commit to being part of something bigger than just a typical 9-to-5 job and see you later, have a nice day. We look for these people who are willing to pitch in, to roll up their sleeves, and to make this thing work, regardless of where they come from or what they look like.
All right. We only have, I was just told 2 more minutes, so I will go through these a lot quicker. The second one is democratic member control. We've already talked about that, 1 member, 1 vote. Members' economic participation, we've talked about that one. There is some pay-in. I won't go through the details, but only to say that what I've learned before for EcoExchange, that people can do their buy-in, they can pay it from their checks. Is that right?
Right, interest-free, up to 4 years to pay off the buy-in of the 1 voting share.
Okay. And then we've already talked about the other side of it is they get dividends back, a couple $1,000s that they can get in cash in February and maybe a couple $1,000 in savings, which goes into their shares to help the company grow. It works wonderfully well. Then you got autonomy and independence. You have to be able to control and own, not only own the business, but control the business. The 5th one we talked about, which is my favorite, education, training, and information. That's the 5th principle of cooperatives, for the modern cooperative. And then the 6th one, I had wanted to spend more time on, but we don't have time. It's cooperation among cooperatives. What I get, Brian, is that you all buy from cooperatives. Those are your farm cooperatives, and then you end up selling to cooperatives. Food co-ops and other co-ops. So the last one is concern for community, and you are doing it with the fair trade, all communities. Brian, we got to go. Any other, just last comment, last sentence?
No, I just want to, again, thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak on the co-ops. It's something that I came into so late in life. I wish, looking back, that I had learned more about it sooner.
Me too.
It really is great to be part of something that, I pay my bills with my paycheck, but more important, when I go home at night and I put my head on the pillow, it feels nice to be part of something that's bigger than yourself and not just, another cog in the wheel on a typical company.
Thank you, buddy. Thanks a lot. See you, everybody, next Thursday. Have a great one.
1450 WOL.